Hello, I'm Kyle Warmack with the West Virginia Humanities Council. Welcome to History Alive. History Alive is a program of the Humanities Council that brings historical figures to life through first-person portrayals by presenters who have conducted thorough research into their character. The Humanities Council makes these characters available to both nonprofit and for-profit organizations across West Virginia. History Alive is designed as an interactive experience between the character and the audience. They are entertaining and educational. We encourage your organization, school, or event to host a presentation and bring a figure from history for a visit with your audience or students. Having someone like Harriet Tubman or Stonewall Jackson come to speak to your group can breathe life into these historical figures. Nothing compares to the live, in-person visit. Each presentation consists of 3 parts: a monologue, a question-answer session with the character, and then the presenter breaks character to answer questions about how he or she conducted their research. Our History Alive presenters have researched a variety of sources such as diaries, journals, letters, official documents, autobiographies, and the research of other scholars in developing their character. A History Alive presentation is not a play. It is an audience participation event that relies on interaction between the audience and the character. Being able to ask your own questions of these important figures from the past is a unique experience. It's difficult to reproduce the feel of an actual History Alive presentation here in the studio. Without an audience to ask questions, we will change the format a bit and have our guests sit with me for a few questions after the monologue. But we hope to give a sample of how a History Alive presentation can add to your program offerings. There will be information on the screen at the end of the program for how to contact the Humanities Council about bringing a History Alive character to your community. At this time, I would like to welcome today's guest from history. We are pleased to have with us in the studio, Betsy Smith.
My name is Betsy Smith. I was born poor in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but I grew up singing and dancing on street corners with my brother Andrew. Folk would pass by and they throw pennies and nickels. But every now and again they throw dimes. And whenever they throw dimes, I'd say, "That's right, give to the church." Oh, even back then folks said I had a big voice and knew how to carry a tune. Now, my other brother, Clarence, he was already in show business. See, he traveled with the Rabbit-Foot Minstrels. Their featured performer was none other than Ma Rainey. Well, now, see, she was the mother of the blues. And they called her that because, Lord have mercy, when that woman would sing, oh, you could just see and you could feel all the hurt and the sorrow that our folk had been through. You could see and hear the truth about life, because that's what the blues is, you know, it's the truth. Anyway, one day, Clarence, he said, "Bessie gal, you know, I think you could make it in show business too." So he took me down to see Ma. Child, I was so excited. I'm fitting to meet Ma Rainey in person. Well, we get down there, and she looks me up and down, and she say, "This here gal's got spunk. I think I can teach her to sing the blues." So that's what I did. I sang the blues. We had us a time too, traveling all over with Ma, all over Bam. Well, see, that's what we called down south. We go from town to town, strutting our stuff, up and down the main street, you know. That way folk would know there's going to be a show that night. We'd have our costumes on. We'd give them a show too. Oh, we had singing and dancing, of course, and we had comedy, and we had juggling, and we had contortionists. We even had fire eaters. Yes, we did. We had everything it would take to entertain you and make you forget the troubles that you come in with. And child, let me tell you, back then, folk had plenty of troubles to forget. See, they had something called Jim Crow back then. Now, see, that wasn't no man. See, them was laws they had. Laws that said things like colored children and white children couldn't go to school together, and Colored and white couldn't ride the same railroad cars. It was a whole slew of other things colored folk couldn't do. But I can't hardly recollect all that right now. There were some hard times, though. But they was good times, too. Traveling with Ma. Oh, Lord. But, you know, good things, they got to come to an end. Pretty soon, folk was calling me to come sing all up north and everywhere. Got my own troupe. After a while, Clarence, he was traveling with me for a little bit. And my half-sister Mary from West Virginia, she was traveling with me. She was in my troupe for a while. See, I had what they called a class act. That meant I performed inside theaters too, not just in the tents. And see, we didn't have no fancy microphones like they do now. See, what we had to do, you had to be able to throw your voice from the stage to the back of the house. Now you do that just right and folk outside on the street could hear you. Now don't get me wrong now. See, I performed the same for everybody, colored and white. Didn't make me no never mind. But you remember what I told you about Jim Crow. Tell you a story. We went down Bam one time. It was down around Chattanooga where I was from, doing a show in the tent. And the Klan come around. Now y'all know who the Klan is. They come around there and said the folk couldn't come in. Well, they come in and get me. And I'm hot, fit to be tied. So I go out there and I look around for the first thing I could find. Pretty soon I see me a stick on the ground. I picked it up and I went straight to the ringleader and I said, man, if you're going to do something, you best come on. Because I'm the first one you're going to have to take out of here. You know, they looked at me like I was crazy. But the folk standing around, they started clapping and cheering. And you know, that Klan turned on around and got out of there. I guess I was so mad, I didn't have sense enough to be scared. Oh, Lord have mercy. I believe that was about 1923. That was the same year I did my first record. Made my first record. Oh, I tell you, it was always some white men coming around talking about, Bessie, let's make records. Let's make records. All of them was lying except for one. He said, Bessie, come on up here to New York. We're going to make us a record. So that's what I did. And I recorded Downhearted Blues. You know, they paid me $125 for every song. Now that was $250 for every record. Child, I thought I was rich. Yes, I did. I did everything I thought I was big and bad enough to do. I could outdrink, outcuss, and outfight any man that was bold enough to step up in my face. But you best believe not too many of them tried that. Oh, now don't get it messed up. Because see, I know right from wrong. Because my daddy was a preacher. And when I chose to be right, I was good as gold. But when I chose to be wrong, I was even better. Oh, Lord have mercy. I tell you something. We had us a time traveling all over. Oh, but what I learned was if you really wanted to make the money, you had to go to Harlem. Harlem in New York. That's what I did. Oh, I played all the fancy night spots back then. All the black and tans. See, that's what they call the nightclubs that allowed colored and white in at the same time. And all the big name musicians about that time wanted to play for me too. Folk like old Benny Goodman and Louis Armstrong. They all wanted to play for Miss Bessie. Oh, I tell you, Harlem was jumping back then. Yes, it was. and looked like colored folk was leading the way. It was folk like Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston, all of them. You know, folk love to put labels on things. And I think now they call that time the Harlem Renaissance. Oh, all we knew was we was having a good time. Yes, we did. It was about that time they started calling me the Empress of the Blues. Well, see, I was making near $2,500 a week. See, now that's good money now. When you got a little bit of money, you can do some things. So what I did, I bought my sisters houses next door to my own in Philadelphia. See, I bought me a house in Philadelphia, bought them one. It was all right in a row. Had me an apartment there in Harlem. I even bought my very own railroad car. Yes, I did. Now, I wasn't trying to show out. Well, maybe just a little bit. Oh, it was pretty. White, trimmed in gold. When you got money, you can do some things. Lord have mercy. But like I told you, all good things got to come to an end sometime. Around about 1929, I believe it was, they had something they call the stock market crash. Now, mind you, I was used to performing every night, making good money. Up there in Harlem, you didn't think too much about that Jim Crow and what was going on down south. You felt like a star up in Harlem. But then here come this stock market crash. I told you about how folk like to put labels on things. I think now they calling that the Great Depression. Well, it was something else. White folks was losing their mind. They was jumping out windows and all sorts of foolishness. Colored folk didn't even know it was a depression on. Now, y'all know I'm telling the truth. When folks is poor, it's just business as usual. But I guess it did depress me a little bit. Because all those nightclubs, they stopped calling. Folks stopped hiring. All them friends you thought you had, they were nowhere to be found. See, when I was on top, it was folk coming out the woodwork, just knocking down your door, wanting to see what you got on, wanting to hear what you gonna say. I had plenty of folk used to sit at my table and drink free liquor and brag about how they was out on the town with Miss Betsy Smith, the Empress of the Blues. Lord, folk is something else. When you're on top, everything is good. But I tell you one thing, when you get down on your luck, friends are hard to find.
As we mentioned at the top of the show, it's difficult to replicate the unique experience of a History Alive question and answer session without a live audience. But I'm lucky enough to fill that role today. Please join me in welcoming back our guest, Betsy Smith. Thank you so much for joining us, Miss Smith.
Thank you.
We've got some questions for you. Your music is really incredible. What influences your sound?
Well, I grew up in a time where the blues was really just coming in and getting to be popular. And so the folk that I looked up to, like Ma Rainey, they the ones that was my inspiration, and my brother Clarence, of course. And it was folk, different musicians back then that I wanted to work with, and all of them, we learned from each other.
What do you think has been the secret to your success thus far?
Well, like a lot of folk, especially when that depression come on, I just kept on going. See, I wasn't too proud to go back down south and perform and start charging 25 cents at the gate again. See, I was making good money. But see, the thing was, I knew I had an audience down there. Folk loved me, so I knew I could make some money. It might take longer, but I survived that depression thing.
So how much are you on the road? Do you ever settle down? And if so, what place do you call home?
I love to be on the road. I love traveling. Now, I bought me a house in Philadelphia. I got a house there. And I had an apartment there in Harlem. I got rid of that after a little while. But, when that depression thing come on. But I love Philadelphia, and so that's where I call home. But I stay on the road as much as I can.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned your half-sister Mary is a singer, too. Do you perform together with her often?
Oh, she used to be with me all the time. She started out doing the wardrobe for me. She'd take care of my clothes and things. And she kept saying she could sing, and I never would let her. Then finally one night I let her come on the stage, and she was pretty good, and she could dance too. I taught her how to dance. Then she could dance, and so she was one of my dancers in my chorus line. Then after that, I let her sing every once in a while, and she went off on her own after I was gone. But she did pretty well for herself, but I gave her a hard time.
Can you tell me a little bit about the musicians and the band that play with you?
Oh, I always had different musicians. I said I performed with Louis Armstrong, Benny Goodman. Now, they would record with me. Now, the people that I have on the road with me, I pick up musicians here and there. But I had a couple of folks. When I started out, I didn't use no drummer. Now, see, they told me at the record companies I had to use a drummer. I like to keep the beat. I want them to follow me. But they said that's what you got to do is you got to have a drummer. So I got me a drummer. And that drummer, one of them, he stayed with me 2 or 3 years, I believe. That's probably the longest I had any of them musicians. But a lot of them I worked with, they was all good. But they had to follow my rules. That was the thing. And a lot of folks don't want to do what a woman tell them to do.
So is performing, is down south your favorite place to perform, or do you have a favorite?
Well, I love performing down south because, see, folk down south, they don't put on no airs or anything, and they love the blues down there. Now, see, folk up north, especially colored folk, they forgot where they came from. They got rid of blues. They got up north, and they into this thing called jazz now. So, see, they want to forget the blues because that make them think about being poor down south. But the folk down south, they still love Betsy Smith. They always love Bessie, so I always go down to south and perform. I don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little more about this train car that you bought for yourself. You gave us a description of it. Were there any particular reasons for investing in a train car?
Well, yes. For one thing, it had a kitchen on it. We'd be frying fish and cooking collard greens and everything, riding from Philadelphia down south. And see, we'd have us a good time. We didn't have to worry about not being able to sit in the railroad cars with the white folk, because we had our own car. Our own whole car had sleeping accommodations in it and everything. So we was comfortable. And when you get down south, you had a place where they'd unhook the train, they'd unhook the car, and we could take our stuff and set up and do our show, and then we could put it back on the train, and they'd hook up to us again, and we could go where we needed to go. So it just made sense. Because, when you're down south and you're performing, especially in the tents, see, you'd be out in the middle of nowhere usually, and it'd be dark at night when you get finished. And if it wasn't a colored rooming house or a hotel nearby, you had to sleep in the car. And that was dangerous back then. So it made sense to have a railroad car. I wasn't trying to show off or nothing.
Yeah.
It looked good, though.
But it was a very practical choice.
That's right.
You have some very serious songs in your repertoire: Jailhouse Blues, Workhouse Blues, Prison Blues, Sing Sing Prison Blues, and Send Me to the Electric Chair. What's the inspiration for these songs?
Now, don't think I ever been to prison, because I ain't. But folk that I know, that's the life they live. And especially down south. That's just the way it was in Jim Crow. folk could get sent to prison and the workhouse for anything, any small thing. You look like you don't have a home, you a vagrant, they put you in the workhouse. So I just sang about what I knew. I wrote about what I knew.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Miss Smith. And welcome to the show, Doris Fields.
Thank you.
So, Doris, how did you first become interested in Bessie Smith?
Well, I was working for Theater West Virginia, and a friend of mine suggested that I write and perform a one-woman show. And I didn't know who, so I started researching different women, and literally one night an encyclopedia fell on the floor, open to the page with Betsy Smith on it, and we've been together ever since.
Wow. And how long ago was that?
That was 2002.
Wow.
Yeah.
What were some of your most important sources for gaining insights into Bessie's character?
Well, I read several books about Bessie. I bought all the music I could find, her compilation of all her music. She recorded over 160 songs during her career, which that was a huge number of songs for an artist of her period. And at the time, the internet didn't have as much information as it does now about the blues or about Betsy Smith. There's a lot more now, so I keep learning even now about things that I didn't know about her and about the era that she lived in. So it's been an ongoing process for like 18 years, still learning about Bessie. But now she's become such a part of me, is, you know, I can like turn her on and off. It's like she's always in the back of my mind.
I know the full presentation that you do involves and integrates music, and that's very unusual for a History Alive character to have music as part of the presentation. How did you approach integrating the music with Bessie's story?
Well, that was sort of as interesting as the fact that the encyclopedia fell open to the page on Betsy Smith. I actually wrote the show, The Lady and the Empress, in 24 hours, and by that time I had the music already. All the songs, I had listened to everything, and in the back of my mind she's saying, just write what you want to write and I'll tell you which songs. And she did. And so she said, this song goes here. And that's how it worked.
How has your knowledge of Bessie influenced your own music and career?
Well, Bessie was a very confident performer. And I think researching her and playing her has given me a lot more confidence in my regular music performances. And I always sort of, you know, sometimes right before I go on stage, I say, Bessie, come on, you know, we got to go do this. So she's sort of like an angel on my shoulder.
Mm-hmm. And has her music itself influenced your songwriting at all?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I've got a new CD that's going to be out within the next couple of months, and it's all original music, and a couple of the older, more classic sounding blues tunes are basically my tribute to Bessie.
Mm-hmm. When did you get started with your own musical career?
Well, I've always wanted to sing. I've been singing since I was like 3 years old in church and choirs and things like that, but I didn't start singing professionally until 1988.
Oh, wow. And how has your Bessie portrayal been influenced by your theater background?
Well, I've always loved theater, and I got started, one of the first shows I did that I didn't realize until I started researching Bessie. One of the first shows I did was with the Charleston Playhouse and Tavern in Kanawha City, and it was called Blues in the Night, and two of the tunes were Betsy Smith tunes. And I didn't realize at the time who Betsy Smith even was, and I didn't remember those tunes until I started researching Bessie. So that had a big influence on wanting to do Betsy Smith. And working with Theater West Virginia, Charleston Stage Company, Kanawha Players, I love theater, so it was sort of natural for me to come up with a one-woman show that I could do, you know, with just what I wanted in it. And Bessie was, she was just a natural progression for me, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, when we think of lively theater scenes, we think of big cities like New York and Chicago and San Francisco and things like that. Why is it important to have theater in a place like West Virginia?
Because arts and culture is for everybody, all over the country, all over the world, and people who are in underserved areas, they deserve just as good a theater scene, music scene, whatever the cultural things you want to bring to the area, they're needed. And there's some little girl, some little boy that just might need to see your performance for them to feel like, yeah, that is what I want to do, and I'm gonna go for it. So you never know who you might influence with your performances, with your artwork. So it's necessary.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of children, you've often performed Betsy Smith for school children. What are the interactions like with a character like Bessie and school children?
Well, the stage play, the bigger version is not a lot different from what I do in schools. I tone down some of the language in the schools, and school kids, we do a question and answer just like this. I do some questions, I answer as Bessie, and then I break character and answer some questions as myself. And kids, they get it. They're real entertained by Bessie. They will ask her a lot of silly questions, about her boyfriends and things like that, and what was going on in her day, what kind of clothes they wore. And it's real interesting, but I've never had a bad experience with kids as far as Bessie goes. Like I said, they get it. They understand the fact that, I always tell them Betsy Smith was sort of the Little Kim of the 20s and 30s, because she was really raunchy, and she definitely was the epitome of singing the devil's music. Back then, a lot of people did not accept Bessie. She wasn't one that fit in to a lot of spaces, but the kids, they could understand that. Once I said she was the Little Kim of the 20s and 30s, they understood who Bessie was.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Doris.
Thank you.
If your organization is interested in hosting a History Alive presentation, call the number on your screen or visit www.wvhumanities.org for more information.